Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Stefan, for the kind introduction. And I should say congratulations to everyone at Transporeon for your anniversary. I apologise for the lack of a moving image, but perhaps these days you might prefer that as a bit of a change. So, as Stefan mentioned, I'm Secretary General of FNL, or to give the organisation its full name, the European Freight and Logistics Leaders Forum. So perhaps we'll just stick to FNL. FNL is an independent, not-for-profit network of senior business leaders operating across the supply chain, specifically in the logistics sector. Our network is broadly 50-50 between shippers and carriers, although we do draw on the expertise of many others, including academics, technologists, policymakers, NGOs, and so on. Our aim is to provide a forum for confidential and open debate on current issues and future strategic changes in the logistics sector, and to spread best practice. I use that introduction because I want to take the next few minutes to mention a few thoughts, and I hope to encourage you to at least challenge some of your assumptions around networking and optimizing your strategic positioning for the future. These thoughts are much on the minds of our members. So, networking, the new collaboration. I start with the premise that the coronavirus is not a black swan event. We have known for some time that a pandemic crisis was coming, but chose to ignore it because we miscalculated the risk and effects of that crisis. Furthermore, climate change is not a black swan event either, but would cause far more damage and would not be a single event, but ongoing. So why does this matter? Well, to quote from Professor Gordon Wilsmeyer and Professor Marcus Thiel in their recent paper, The Jenga Tower Has Fallen. The complexity of global supply chains and its lack of transparency and collaboration has led to little or no control over disruption causes, and even less capability to trace the unfolding consequences and their underlying relationships. If you read their paper, you'll see it's a great deal more complex, but that gives you a quick summary. We have a lack of visibility and control. That is less of a problem when our just-in-time supply chains run smoothly, but when disruptions occur, either supply or demand-led, then we cannot easily control the damaging effects. So why is the action insufficient to match the potential crisis? It may just be that we're too busy, or that it costs too much, or we can't get the attention of our CEO or decision maker, or the senior team are complacent, or more likely, they just hope it won't happen on their watch. But those who fail to act may be jeopardizing their business, either because they can't cope with the fallout, or perhaps more importantly, because their companies are no longer perceived to act in an acceptable way. Think about these three suppositions. If you work in the FMCG sectors, the consumer will not accept the status quo. Look what's happening around us today. If you are a supplier, directly or indirectly, to the FMCG sectors, you cannot ignore your customer. And if you work in the logistics sector, you're an easy target for politicians, policymakers, and yes, even financiers. Even if we believe another pandemic, disruption, or other event isn't coming, our stakeholders will demand change, because crises are bad news, and ignoring an expected crisis is no longer acceptable. We know we need to take action to change logistics. Society now deems it necessary, not least because freight logistics is the only sector where greenhouse gases are still increasing. The innovation ideas are available if not commercialized. We also know there is no silver bullet, but a multitude of tools that are required. Perhaps we don't act because of cost, or perhaps we don't act because of the fear it's not the right time to invest. Here's the old boiling frog syndrome. When do I act? Do I act too early, or do I leave it and then I don't survive at all? So, a lack of understanding, competition, or perhaps just inertia. Perhaps most importantly, because we can't see the benefit of acting alone. Often the view prevails, I can make no difference, but my company should act. FNL carried out some research in May with its members, and we asked some questions in a survey around who should be acting and are they acting? And the feedback was that as individuals, we thought CO2 reduction was a critical issue, but the expectation prevailed that our companies were responsible for dealing with it. and to a lesser extent, the government. And so this theme pervades that we all believe it's important, but it's really for the company or potentially the government to deal with. So the other point to note here is that there has to be cross-border or indeed company-wide, sector-wide approach. Just as COVID-19 doesn't stop at the border crossing, neither does CO2. We should accept these events require better networking or dialogue and collaboration across industries, borders, and indeed generations. Why is it in their best interests? Well, Gartner, the research and advisory firm, talks about business models moving on from the value chain to enterprise and then to the distributed model. In other words, no ultimate control. A bit like blockchain, which is a distributed ledger. The argument runs that we all have to find our place in a particular ecosystem, or maybe several ecosystems. And to do so effectively, we need to work out who or which are our optimal partners. Even the largest global businesses seek partners to enhance their position. So the obvious questions are, which ecosystem and which technology to prepare for that ecosystem? Time and again, people say that their internal digital projects within a manufacturing business are not aligned with external supply chain digitalization. Everyone thinks they can build their own ecosystem. By definition, they can't. Look at the financial services industry, which is in some respects way ahead in its use of technology, but it still has huge legacy systems which don't talk to each other and certainly don't talk externally. This provides huge inefficiencies. The future winners in the logistics industry will be collaborative, advanced in their use of technology, rather than simply technologically advanced, multi-generational and flexible, and therefore be successful and sustainable. So what should we do? Well, perhaps one thing we should easily do is change our KPIs. What are we benchmarking? We should have better institutional and company leadership. We should have better collaboration, although collaboration is sometimes a dirty word, so let's call it a better form of networking. We network, so we claim we should be able to collaborate, but here are some of the problems. Largely, it's about a short-term sales agenda. We all know about that, but there are some other issues. One of them is purely cultural. Here's a map as the world seen from the Chinese perspective. We often look at a map, look at Europe, but if you look at it from a Chinese perspective, Western Europe is up in the northwest corner in the top left. They don't look at the world in the same way as us, and it's always we should bear that in mind, whatever the cultural differences may be. You need to understand your partner, and you need to succeed, not to come with predetermined ideas. We tend to be time constrained, and we tend to come slightly with closed minds. A few years ago, FNL did a survey with its members, and we asked different groups whether they were carriers, shippers, deemed consumers, or indeed regulatory bodies. What did they think was the most important? And consistently, everyone else thought that reliability was important, but they felt that all of the other parties thought price was important. And so there was this complete mismatch and lack of acceptance of what the people down the supply chain were looking for. Essentially, people too often think they're still selling a tin of beans or a tin of Frankfurters, whereas actually what we're trying to sell is a value-added service. If we don't see it that way, we won't survive. It sounds odd in the era of social networking, but relationships matter. For example, if you deleted all your relationships from pre-lockdown and relied on those of the last few months, would the online versions be strong enough for you to be comfortable in taking decisions and committing or risking capital? When supply chain interruptions occur, people seem to revert directly to person-to-person contact to solve issues. Either that's because they don't trust their own information, or they felt personal discussions were the only way to solve a problem. Networking must therefore stop being transactional and must be the start of a successful collaborative approach. And we mustn't just see it in monetary terms. FNL works with shippers and carriers. We have plenty of company, industry, and other networking boilers, so why bother? Well, we're completely neutral. We support, but we don't lobby. We have a diverse community, as I said before, between carriers, shippers, and many other, including technology businesses, innovators, NGOs, and academics. Everything we discuss is confidential. And we believe that effective selling is best through ideas than through a sales pitch. People come to learn, comment, question, problem solve, and yes, network. There is an acceptance that networking inevitably means selling, but through the medium of shared knowledge. So our network promotes collaboration. So what does this mean for the future of the logistics sector? Well, relationships will still matter, but just as important will be the trust in your brand or your company, both for your employees, that's existing and potential, but also for your partners when you share IP, the obvious example being data. We need to build lean resilience where the supply chain is both flexible and efficient. We need to have a better analysis of risk. We need to build a value-added service and, as I say, not be purely transactional. And each part of the supply chain must find a niche where it can demonstrate it adds value. Otherwise, the assumption will be it disappears. Therefore, finding solutions will require collaboration when fostered through networking. So good luck with your networking today and tomorrow. And if you can, join us for our next bit of networking in Geneva in November, where we will be hosted by the United Nations. And you'll be very welcome, and I do hope some of you can join us. Thank you very much for listening.